Okay, good morning all, and thanks for joining us this morning for the Solar Solutions for Every Farm webinar. So today we're joined by Neil Stott from Mypower, who are an improved installer for NFU Energy, and also Thomas Ovenden, who is our renewables manager at NFU Energy. Just a few sort of housekeeping. My name's Gemma. I'm head of marketing at NFU Energy. I will be doing the question and answers at the end. So everybody will be on mute and their cameras are already turned off. So for any Q&A, please feel free to use the Q&A feature or the chat. So any questions that you have throughout the webinar, put them into there. And then what we'll do is we'll come back to those questions at the end, and I'll point them to the relevant person, whether that's Neil or Thomas. So without further ado, I will hand over to Neil. So yes, welcome, Neil.
Good morning, everyone. Let me just set up my slides here very, very quickly. And we'll just that's come through okay. Has that come through? Is that now sharing?
Yeah, all good, Neil. Perfect.
Brilliant, fantastic. So, good morning, everyone. My name's Neil Stott. I'm the Business Development Director at Mypower. Over the next sort of 20 or 30 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a quick 101 on sort of commercial agricultural rooftop solar, dispel some of the myths and give you an idea of the considerations for solar for your farm in order for you to find the perfect fit. So a little bit of an intro on us. We were founded in 2010, and over that time, pleased to say we've won a number of national and regional awards for our work, and we've installed over 50 megawatts. So that's around 140,000 panels of primarily rooftop solar in that time. So all of our stuff is connected behind the meter, so supplying into commercial operations, businesses, and so on, rather than the big sort of the solar fields into the utility or the grid side of things. We see a lot of business coming from, in fact, a significant portion of our business coming from repeat customers or referrals from our customers, and that's something that we're really proud of and going to maintain. We have quite a heritage in supporting the farming industry. My business partner and managing director comes from a farming family. And just to give you a sort of flavour, the last 6 years or so since I've been with the business, we've installed on over 41 farms. So 6 years ago that was almost coming to the end of the government subsidy. So still proven to be a very popular solution in the time between then. We install a range of systems starting from 50 kilowatts, around 100 panels for sort of local to the largest rooftops, the sort of 3, 4, 5,000 megawatt scale panels. So you'll see lots of solar related images as I go through my slides and presentation. These are all from our own installations, including these on the sort of title slide. Top right, as you're looking at the screen, is Purbeck Ice Cream in Dorset. Sheppey Cider in Somerset is top left. Got PJ Yates, a 300-acre dairy farm near Derby, second in from the left at the top, and then Lycross Farm near Bristol, which is down on the bottom. The one that is slightly different from the others is Gloucester Cathedral, which is an installation we commissioned in 2016, and again, it's one we're incredibly proud of. It's not your normal everyday; it was definitely a labour of love. But you can pretty much install solar anywhere. So that's a bit of intro there. Lots of farms have chosen solar, but why did they choose solar in the first place? So just to get my machine working, why would you consider solar for your farm in the first place? Typically two reasons, commercial and environmental. On the commercial side of things, the savings when you do an equivalent of what you're generating your electricity at in terms of per unit, it works out about 4 to 5 pence, and that's including level of operations maintenance there, cost over time, versus typically for grid price today, probably closer to 20 pence a unit, but anywhere between 20 and 30 pence a unit you'll be paying for your daytime electricity today. So when you see that, you can see quite a significant difference between what you're paying for from the grid and what the per unit cost is coming from your own solar. One of the other ways that we look at the commercial element is how quickly the system will pay for itself. And again, typically we see this in the sort of 4 to 6 year range. And some of the things I'm going to talk you through later on will explain where you see those variances, why one maybe 6 years, one maybe 4 years, one maybe 3 years payback. And that's before any annual investment allowance tax benefit that you and your farm business may be able to utilise. The other element is the environmental side of things. So obviously, it depends on how far into the chain that you look, but when the panels are generating, they're not producing CO2. If you look at the CO2 cost associated with the actual panel production and shipping to our market, it's probably around a 2 year payback, or is around a 2 year payback in terms of carbon footprint of those panels. But as I say, generating the electricity, that's zero carbon electricity, and on a typical 150 kilowatt peak system, you'll avoid around 28 tons of CO2 per annum compared to the UK grid supply. So these are based on was DEFRA, I think it's now been moved over to Department for Energy and Net Zero. Based on their figures, they look at the whole of the UK power grid, look at all of the sources that are generating electricity, and then they attribute a carbon kilogram value to every kilowatt hour there. So it's a very straightforward and tangible measure that you can work there. And then to give you an idea of sort of the size or impact of the benefit, with the way that we size systems and that sort of 4 to 6 year payback, we regularly see around 30 to 40% of a farm's annual electricity needs being met by solar. So in some cases, if they've got a larger roof space and a smaller supply and they choose to install more solar, we've certainly seen upwards of 40%. Or conversely, if you've got a huge consumption and not a huge amount, or not a suitable roof, then it may be that you're down under the 30% in terms of your annual electricity needs. With those figures there, just to give you a flavour in terms of finance, which something the NFU Energy team can talk you through, you're typically adding a couple of pennies per unit onto the equivalent electricity cost rate. So it's still very cost effective to use somebody else's money to fund your investment. So that's the why you do it. I'm going to give you a very brief view of how it works. I'm guessing many of you have a good idea how solar PV works. For those that don't, it's probably worth me spending 60 seconds or so just running through the basics. So this chart here is just showing you the main component, main principle, and it's a 45 kilowatt installation example for this is actually a dairy farm in Dorset that we've worked with. So starting from the left, the sun, photons from the sun hit the panels, hit the silicon in the panels, releases electrons or stimulates the electrons. The electrons then form a DC current that runs from the panels to the unit here, which is the orange unit, which is an inverter. Inverters look like that. If you're familiar, it's about the size. Your typical commercial inverter is about the size of a residential boiler. So in this case, the system is generating, or predicted to generate 43,154 kilowatt hours per annum. Then part of the modelling process is the inverters. Well, the inverters do one of two things. They convert it from DC current to AC current, which is what you use in your supply, and they also synchronise with the grid. So if you're consuming energy and you need energy in your supply, it will send that energy into your supply. And if you're not consuming, so if everything's switched off, it will export it to the grid and it can be sold to the grid. We model this, so some very clever modeling software which allows us to model your profile. We'll talk a little bit more about profiles in a minute. Your profile of consumption versus the expected profile of solar generation. So in very, very simple terms, if you're using all of your energy at night and in the dark hours, your solar is generating during the day, so you're likely to export 100% to the grid and not use any of your solar in the supply. That's an extreme example there. So in this case, it's roughly half of the generation is going into the supply and half of it is going out and being sold to the grid. This site's using just under 65,000 kilowatt hours per annum. So 40,000 of that is coming from the grid, and 22,000 is coming from the solar. So that's the principle of how that works. How did this system perform? So this system was performed was installed in mid 2022. And this is a sort of the monitoring platforms are there to monitor and show what the system has produced compared against what it was expected. So it's expected to produce 43,154 kilowatt hours, and in 2023 it produced slightly under that, I think it's about 5-6% under that at 40,705. Now, as I mentioned, I've been involved in the industry for the last 6 years or so, and every year I've been in a position to say actually it's overperformed, and typically it's 2-3-4% overperforming. Last year, and as farmers you'll know much better than I, the weather wasn't great. I think it was the 11th wettest year on record, and that does have an impact on the yield from the system. And certain months were washouts and had an impact on generation. However, the system still performed to a pretty high standard, pretty close on the expected yield. So hopefully we're going to see a recovery, and typically in a year where you do see a month drop out with really poor weather, we see a recovery later on in the year. But certainly last year that didn't come to push it back over that 100% mark in terms of achieving there. So hopefully that shows you how it works and gives you an indication of how accurate the initial predictions are, which is pretty important for your commercial business case. So moving on to the commercial business case, on intro talked about the benefits and the commercial benefits. So I'm going to work through an example here, which is a recently quoted system. Again, dairy farmer based near Stafford. So dairy farms are consumers of electricity, and there's a good profile fit there. So we sized the system for them of 74 kilowatt peak. So that, and they've got an annual consumption of around 120,000 kilowatt hours. System cost-wise, just under £54,000, and that system, that 74 kilowatt peak system, is expected in the area where we've installed and how we've installed it expected to generate 66,000 kilowatt hours. Now, when we talked about the modelling, the energy used on site, it's a dairy farm. They've got cooling, and they're also running the pumps, suction devices, and so on. So there, when you model it against their data, it's likely that they're going to be using about 77% of that electricity, of that 66,000 kilowatt hours on site, with the remaining going to the grid and being sold. And that as a percentage of their overall needs is over that 40% mark. So their total annual electricity needs, 42% of that is going to be met by the solar from their roof. Next figures down, expected first year income and savings. I'm going to delve into that so you can see where those numbers have come from, and then a simple first year return on capital. So looking at how quickly it's going to pay back and what your return is based on that first year savings and income and your initial capital cost. Typically, we see around 20% plus return on simple ROI, return on investment, and a 4 to 6 year payback, as I mentioned before, and that's before the annual investment allowance benefit. So to break those numbers down a little bit, so you can see how it works. This particular customer was locked into their electricity contract. They're paying 29 pence a kilowatt hour for their electricity. So 77% of that 66,000 is going to be consumed on site. So 77% of that 66,000 is this figure is the 50,928. And because they're using that on site, they're not buying that energy from the grid at 29 pence. Therefore, they save £14,769. The remaining electricity, the exported electricity, which is the 23% or 15,212 kilowatt hours, which is going to be sold to the grid, can be sold to the grid. I put in a rate of 5 pence a kilowatt hour. At the moment, the rates are actually 6-7 pence a kilowatt hour. That rate does move around, but that will earn an income of about £760 per annum. So when you total those two together, that's where you get your £15,530 of income and savings based on that first year. And that's where you get that first year rate of return. Just to give you a flavour of the impact of the variables. So there are a couple of variables at play here. The first one is that percentage of the solar that you use on site. So obviously, if you use less of your solar on site, what that will do is mean that you're going to earn, you're going to push more into the grid at 5 pence a unit rather than saving at 29 pence a unit. So that will impact, that will slightly extend your payback period. So in this case, I've put played with the variables a little bit, so changing that 77% on-site consumption to 50%. So 50% is going into the supply, so saving. So for that will be 33,000 kilowatt hours, saving 29 pence, and then 50% is going to the grid. So again, 33,000 kilowatt hours at 5 pence. When you work through the numbers there, you're still seeing over 20% return on investment, and the payback period extends from, in this case, it's a very good payback period of 3.5 years up to 4.5 year, 4.8 year payback. Again, one of the other variables that we can't control is the grid price. As I mentioned, the grid price is currently in the region of sort of between 20 and 25 pence. So I've changed it on this one, so it's left with a 77% used on site, but moved 29 pence down to 20 pence. And again, that has a similar impact there. It drops it down to about a 20% return on investment or a 4.9 year payback. So you can see the sort of the sensitivity to some of those variables which are outside of our control. Certainly the grid price is definitely outside of our control, and the percentage you consume on site is really down to how much energy you're using and when you're using that energy. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the commercial value. I'm just going to give you sort of illustration of how it pans out for different farms. So I'm not going to go into too much details. It's quite busy charts and slides and so on, but this is just showing some of the consumption figures across the different farm types that we've worked with. One thing to note here is we're definitely advocates of reduce before you produce. So reduce your energy consumption where you can and make your operations as energy as efficient as possible before looking at generating, or do it in coordination, but always look to reduce your consumption. That's going to be your most effective way of cutting your bills and reducing your carbon footprint. So just working through here, poultry fairly consistent through the year, fairly high level. So that's lighting, ventilation, heating, and so on. Cooling in the winter, feed lines if they're automated, but fairly sort of steady consumption through the year. Not too dissimilar for pig farms that we've worked with, again, heating, ventilation, lighting, feeding and mixing, things like manure pumps and stuff, will keep that energy consumption pretty high and pretty steady. And again, slightly different for dairy, but again, fairly straight line across the year, across the months of consumption. And you can see there, and that's obviously for coolers for the milk, vacuum pumping, and so on. The one that looks quite different to the others is actually arable grain farm, and you can see there very little use throughout the year, and then come sort of July, August, September, October time, when the dryer's a bit in use, you can see significant consumption of electricity. So what that means is that the earlier part of the year, if you've got a big PV system, that's going to be exporting the vast majority of electricity that you consume there, and then it will work well August, September, October, but you're going to end up with a much higher percentage exported to the grid versus consumed on site. So it gives you a slightly longer payback period compared to, say, a dairy farm, poultry or pig farm, but you will still get a return. It's just that initial payback period is going to be slightly longer, and it won't look so good. Very similar to potato farming, the grain side of things, with the sort of chillers coming on once the potatoes have been harvested. So again, very similar. From my point of view, it's quite an odd profile in that you see these big spikes towards the back end of the year. So all of the systems that I've shared with you so far have been less than 100 kilowatts, or around 220 panels. There are a huge range of farm sizes and associated energy demands. We do support smaller scale, sort of 30 kilowatts in our local area, to the largest roof mounts. And just thought I'd share one of our largest agricultural installations with Marshfield Farms, sort of Chippenham way near Bath. I'm sure you're familiar with them. They produce ice cream from their own dairy herd, and typically we see those businesses that have diversified, so where they've gone into ice cream or cheese production or what have you, they're using cold stores, which again is a great fit for solar, because you've got 24/7, 365 consumption. It's high, it's consistent, and therefore you typically see 80–90% of what is generated being soaked up by the cold store, and therefore you get a very good, very healthy payback there. So this is a just under 2,000 panel system, producing around 700,000 kilowatt hours of clean energy for them, and it's meeting over 40% of the farm's electricity needs. So that's Marshfield. How have these companies got there, and what's our advice to sourcing solar for your particular farm? Well, here are the steps. The first one is definitely contact the NFU Energy team. They've got a assessed list of providers on their books, and they will help firstly assess your requirements, detail your requirements, and then pick out from their list the most appropriate company installer out there for you to work with. So first one is contact the NFU Energy team. What I would say is that vetting process is really, really important. We've certainly seen it in the wider market. It's been boom time for solar because of energy prices being so high. So lots of new entrants into the market, lots of people trying their hand at it. And whilst solar is a very straightforward, hopefully I've shared that with you, very straightforward technology, there are lots of things, particularly around farms and commercial buildings, which they can get wrong. So it's things like the health and safety side of things. Obviously, you've got specifics to farmyards. Typically you're working with fibre cement roofs, which can be fragile, so netting underneath. You may have obviously live animals in the area. You may have slurry pits and things like that that need to be aware of. So an experienced installer is certainly something I would recommend. Once you've engaged with them, the first thing is to get an idea of what's going to be best for your business. So there's a number of variables which will be specific to your site. So which roofs, where your supply is, what type of supply that you've got, and really what you're looking to spend and what you're looking to achieve. So it's working that through, understanding your energy, understanding what options are open to you, and before going into too much detail, giving you an indication of the budget and the kind of benefits that you could expect to see. So that's the first thing. The next thing is, once you've got an indication of yes, this size of system is right for you, is then looking at any potential constraints there. So the key one there is the grid application. So the distribution network operator, or the DNO. So in our area in Gloucestershire, it was Western Power Distribution. They've now been taken over by National Grid. So National Grid, but around the country, you've got the likes of Northern Power Grid, Scottish and Southern Electric, and so on. For all of the systems that we install, an application needs to go in to say, can we connect this size of generator into the grid in your particular area? In most cases, they say, yep, that's fine. However, you may need to put some restrictions on there. So restrictions in terms of what you could export as a maximum into the grid at any one time. They're very binary. So even if you're consuming lots of energy and you're highly unlikely to export into the grid, they will still look at it as you could switch off all of your plant and equipment, export, and in the middle of the day, in the middle of the summer, and export the maximum amount from your solar PV system. So they absolutely will assess it in that way. In some cases, and I'm sure some of you may have come up against this, they will say, computer says no, the local grid can't handle it because there's either other generation on the network, or it's just not set up for dealing with renewable generation coming into the supply in that particular area. But really important, we get an indication of that, because that could stop a project, or it could shape a project quite materially. Other couple of things: structural survey. Most modern buildings, and certainly most old buildings as well, it's not an issue loading a 20 kilo panel over 2 square meters on a roof, but we'd certainly recommend a structural survey just to validate that for insurance purposes and so on. Planning has been made more straightforward, but it's a prior or 56-day prior notice process now. Obviously, depends on where you are. There may be other conditions such as AONB and so on, but certainly we've not seen too many issues or challenges on that front in terms of progressing that through. And then, as I mentioned before, there are finance options. You can do a straight capital purchase or finance. Typically, 5, 6, 7 years has worked well for our clients, and most of our clients will go to their regular lending lines. Or there's a third option, which is a capital free, which is a power purchase agreement, which is where a third party will own and operate the system and sell the electricity through to you. We haven't done too many of those, because most of our customers prefer to, obviously, most of our customers prefer to take the full commercial benefit. In that case, the third party is expecting to make a commercial return on it, so they take some of the benefit but still deliver some through to you. So that's where we get to the detail in terms of then the detail of your specific site. So that's then looking at a site survey, where we look at how we're connecting to your supply, any installation plan details, so health and safety, keeping out the way of your farm operations, where we site inverters, which is quite important, as certainly some animals like to investigate them and the cabling around them. So it's keeping it the kit at farm's reach, and then any operations and maintenance considerations. So in some cases, well, certainly for PV, maintenance is minimal compared to many other renewable sources of energy, and what you're looking at is periodic sort of inspections or possibly some scheduled cleaning, and that would be on the basis of the environment that you're in, the environment the roof is in. So if you're in a farm which is kicking up a lot of muck and dust and what have you, and it's getting up to roof level, then it's certainly recommended to put a plan in place there for cleaning the panels so that you're getting the expected generation coming through. So that pretty much brings me to it. But before I wrap up the presentation, you may have noticed the absence of the B word, which is batteries. They're certainly coming into play more, and they certainly appear to be a favoured criteria for the recent agricultural grants. So we're seeing that, and we're seeing the agricultural grants driving the adoption of batteries. They do have their benefits. However, commercially, their proposition still seems limited to some quite unique scenarios. What I will say, though, is their costs are coming down, and we have seen, as I say, we've seen increased demand as a result of that, and also as a result of the grant funding process. Going into the world of batteries, it's a whole other topic. So that would certainly warrant another webinar in itself, and I won't be going into that today. But thank you for your time today. Hopefully, I've given you a better understanding of the considerations and benefits of solar PV, and some good reasons to consider it for your farm if you haven't already done so. And whether it's a 2,000 panel Goliath system that you see on Marshfield, or a 50 kilowatt peak 120 panel system, which you can see on our own roof in the top right picture there, there's a very good chance you're going to see at least a third of your annual electricity needs being met at about a quarter of the price of the grid price. So it's reliable. Hopefully I've shown that. It does what it says on the tin, but certainly don't cut corners on the installation. That's me. So Thomas, back to you. Thank you for your time.
Lovely. Thanks, Neil. Right, I'll bring up my own slides in a moment. So hopefully everyone's good to see that. So yeah, thanks, Neil. My name is Thomas Ovenden, and I'm the Renewable Energy and Channel Manager at NFU Energy, essentially in charge of all of our renewable energy installers and other third parties. So I've just realised that I was on mute. So yeah, what you might have seen me saying, but rather not heard me saying, was that my name is Thomas Ovenden, the Renewable Energy and Channel Manager for NFU Energy. I handle the renewable energy installers and third-party services provided by our company. Our Renewable Energy Solutions, or RES service, has been operating for about 2 years now, and the initial intention of the service was to connect our clients and members with reputable installers for the service that they were looking for, whether that was solar PV, heat pumps, electric vehicle chargers, whatever really took their fancy. And up to date, we've overseen several successful projects help people either get the advice that they need or see through a full installation with companies such as Mypower. We started with 2 solar PV installers right at the beginning, and that has expanded month on month, year on year, to where we are now, which is operating nationwide, so including England, Scotland and Wales, and we now operate across a wider variety of technologies as well. So in the charts below, you can see back in 2022, we had a good number of solar PV installers and a few that were offering electric vehicle charging solutions as well, but not many installers in the realm of wind turbines, heat pumps, and we partner with a few developers who kind of assist landowners with solar farms and battery farms. Moving into 2023, and I'm sure I'll wrap this up at the end of the year as well, we have expanded our number of solar PV installers and moved into greater area in terms of electric vehicle charging, wind, heat pumps, and what we have at the end there, channels, which is our services beyond renewable energy installations, such as diversion of power lines and other matters. So this is something that we are continuing to grow, continue to develop, both in terms of assisting members in any area of the country, but also in a wider variety of services, technologies, and whatever we can do to help. So just to summarize what our RES process is. So one of the things that Neil mentioned was the initial interest should always be to try and reduce your energy demand first before you look at generating your own. And that's something that we hope to conduct through energy efficiency studies. And we also conduct feasibility studies as well. That is through our own in-house consultancy team. So we have our own engineers and consultants who will go to site. They will discuss with you, meet with you, take a look at your energy data, the site, the buildings and the surrounding features, essentially to assess what would be the most appropriate technology for you. We can then look at the initial investment and the returns. We can look at how much energy you could be saving, and then beyond that, the wider effects it will have on your business down the line, how beneficial it will be to you in the long run. Once we've wrapped that up, that is a report that is available to you, and hopefully we always believe that that level of consultancy should be the first key step in any approach to renewable energy. But the other option that we do have is our RES service, which feasibility often leads into, is where we and our team will discuss with you what we think may be the best renewable energy solution for you. So that's based on your desires for the site, but also, as Neil showed, there is a lot of different energy demands based on different agricultural sectors, different sites. Each site is going to be unique, and therefore each one might require a very specific and catered solution. So we will try and find the best one for you. We'll work through a number of questions such as your energy demand, your energy price, where you'd be looking for this installation to occur. We'll wrap that up into a nice, neat referral form for one of our installers to take a look at, and that will be introduced to them. The installer will then work through their process. That will be meeting with you, discussing with you, hopefully a site visit as well to take a look around, and they will then generate a quote for you based on their input and NFU Energy's as well. Any quotes from one of our approved installers will be run by NFU Energy as well for what we call a tech check. That's just some impartial advice on the finances of the quote, the hardware recommended, just to ensure that you are happy with what's been recommended to you, to try and break it down a little bit further, and to offer a little bit more confidence in what's in front of you. Make sure that you're happy with it, make sure that we're happy with it. As all of our installers have been checked by us, there's rarely any issues. It's just, again, a little guarantee of confidence. Make sure that you're happy with what you're getting. If you are happy and we recommend moving ahead. If you need any assistance in finance solutions or insurance, we are partnered obviously with NFU Mutual, who do provide services for insuring renewable energy systems and programs. So we can make the necessary introductions that you may need just to wrap everything up together, make it a one-stop shop for you. Throughout this process, we will track, make sure that you are moving ahead as planned, that you're meeting the deadlines that have been laid out. There are areas that are going to take longer than others, so such as the DNO application. Always good to get that moving nice and early, but also make sure that you meet all the deadlines that us and the installer have agreed upon. That will be both with you yourself, the client or member, as well as the installer. And then following on, once everything is installed and hopefully everything is happy, we will offer any support and advice needed just to assist you, make sure that you're happy with what is now on the site, and hopefully generating energy for you, benefiting you. So if there is anything further down the line that you need, you realize maybe you do need some cleaning or maintenance, maybe you've realized you're tracking your energy and you think maybe a battery might suit me, we can always assist with that, get something retrofitted for you, and move forward that way. We do find that often these renewable energy solutions, while they have a great payback time that Neil mentioned, looking at 3 to 6 years or so, which is really great. It's always a good investment to get involved in. That upfront capital cost can be a major barrier to many people. Thankfully, more government grants are now being rolled out, which should assist members and clients and people in the agricultural community to get these projects up and running on their farm. One that we've seen get a lot of traction recently is the Improving Farm Productivity Grant. This is the second round of that grant. and this was designed to enhance the productivity of the site. One of the main areas it focuses on is sort of automation and robotics, but a second part of this grant was on solar PV systems, specifically rooftop mounted systems, or it could have been a floating system as well on sort of irrigation reservoirs for horticultural sites, etc. This was a grant that required the project to be anywhere from £60,000 up to, I believe, £400,000, and it covered off 25% of the cost. The eligibility checker closed in late March, so unfortunately you can no longer apply for this grant. For those that were successful, and to my knowledge, that's almost anyone that applied ended up being successful and moving on to the full application window. That is now in process. Those that were successful should now have the documents they need to complete. The original close date for that full application is June 2025. I believe the most recent communication from the RPA might be July 2025, but that's, I think, still to be confirmed to wider audiences. We at NFU Energy are offering an application support service for that. So if you are struggling with any portion of the documents or getting the quotes you need or any part of that full application, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to support, whether that's calling us on our number or emailing into our sales inbox. I'll run through those at the end. We'll be more than happy to support on that, and there is the QR code as well on the screen if you want to scan that. Another grant that may be suitable to a different sort of member is the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. So this is designed specifically to support energy efficiency and decarbonisation studies. This does focus on the larger energy users. So within agriculture, that will mostly focus on controlled environment horticulture. The first application window, again, has recently closed. So if any support is needed for those applicants, please let us know. But there will be a second window opening in late summer, and the exact date hasn't been confirmed yet. But that's something that we, again, will be trying to roll out, make aware to our members. Please read in the green all the support that we can provide. Obviously, a number of documents that you will need to work through. So whether you're looking at reducing your energy consumption through energy efficiency, whether you're looking at decarbonisation by reducing your emissions, and whether that you're looking at installations to try and offset any of this through heat pumps, biomass boilers, CHP units, combined heat and power, or anaerobic digestion, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to support as always. A more recent grant is the laying hen housing for health and welfare. This is very similar to the calf housing grant that we saw in recent months, which again is now in full application window. This one is due to open later this month, late June, and there will be two options for this grant. There will be the comprehensive projects that will be replacing, refurbishing existing housing. Essentially, more funding is available for that, but it will be a more in-depth and there'll be more requirements throughout the application. There are also veranda-only projects. So this will be a unit essentially outside of and immediately next to the existing housing, often called a winter garden, I believe, in Europe. But there's two different projects. One is slightly simpler and one will be more comprehensive. There is an option for solar PV to be included in only the comprehensive projects. It won't be available for veranda-only projects. So this is, again, something that we will be hoping to assist in with the applications once we've seen applications open. Again, it will have to be a suitable roof, much like the calf housing and the Improving Farm Productivity grant, where it has to be a south-facing roof with minimal shading, and the structure should be prepared for or to accommodate solar panels. NFU Energy do provide wider services, and one of those is environmental permitting. So if that will likely be something that is required in the comprehensive projects. We can offer a lot of guidance and support throughout that process. So again, please scan the QR code on the screen if you are interested in learning about any of that or utilising any of our services. So thank you very much for listening. I know that was probably a little bit more quick than Neil's section, but I think he covered off everything very extensively. If any of the options that we've just run through, whether that's the renewable energy solutions process, our feasibility studies and energy audits, or any of the grants that we were trying to provide support for, or wider services like environmental permitting or contracts, please feel free to get in touch with us through any of the contact details on the screen. Our number is there, and our sales inbox is open to any and all inquiries, whether that's agricultural, energy, commercial, whatever you need. We'd be more than happy to try and lend a hand with that. So I'm going to wrap up there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll invite Gemma back just to speak a little.
No, thanks, Tom, and thank you, Neil. That was a brilliant presentation. So we have had a question come in already, and just to remind people, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A or the chat feature, and I can pick them up and put your question forward. Failing that, you can always get in touch with us after. But yes, so the first question we've had come in, which I will pass over to Neil. So for ground mounted systems, how far can they be sited away from the power use?
So that's a cost question. So it gets complicated in terms of, obviously you've got to get you're running a cable from the ground mounted system into your incoming supply. So you've got to look at obviously the land it's going over. Very simply, you're digging a trench from your incoming supply all the way to your ground mounted system. The further away you go, the bigger the cable, the more expensive the cable, and if you've got a big system on the end of it, you're then going to be talking quite a big, expensive cable into the ground. So I'd say there's no limit. It's a commercial limit on there in terms of how you would do that. It's just a case of shifting the power from A to B. So it's just commercially how that stacks up, and obviously the landscape that you've got to go over, the distance that you've got to go over, and the size of power you're going to be transferring.
Thanks for that, Neil. I think that is all the questions we have had. If there's any more, please feel free to put them in the chat. But before we go, and sort of after this webinar, what we'll do is we'll send an email out to all those that have attended with a link to watch again, but also some more information and contact details should you wish to, get in touch with the team. So that's not a problem at all. But before we go, I'm just going to share my screen just to show what we've got on for the rest of the week. So we are celebrating Great Big Green Week. What NFU Energy are doing as part of that celebration is running a photo competition at the moment for a chance to win £100 in vouchers. So we're encouraging, farmers and growers that have already installed renewable technology on their farm to, post a photo on their socials, tag us in them, and just give one benefit of what that's done for your business. And the one that we're running this until the end of the week. So the one that kind of catches our eye the most will be the winner, and we'll win some vouchers. So if you want to get involved in that, scan the QR code for more details on how to enter. And also just to remind you as well, so we do have downloadable renewable guides on our website. They're free to download. So across all the different renewable technologies, whether that's solar, wind, anaerobic digestion, electric vehicle charging points. We have a range of downloadable guides that you can look at to see what renewable technology is best suited to your farm. And then also give us a follow on social media. We put up regular daily energy tips. So we follow us, and yeah, we can provide you some information that way as well. So thank you all for attending. Yeah, really appreciate your time this morning, especially on a really lovely summer day. And thank you to our presenters, Neil and Thomas, and we'll be in touch following this webinar with more detail. Okay, so thank you all.
Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you. Oh.